Well, hey, welcome to United Opposition with Scott and Marshall. Today we're taking on the great topic of Trump and Biden. Are you ready? Let's go. Yes, United Opposition. Marshall, how you doing today?
Fantastic. How are you?
Doing great. Had a great weekend. Actually for the past week, got to speak twice at my church on Wednesday night and on Sunday morning. Had a great time doing that. Always a real humbling experience, making sure that I'm not just speaking what's in my head, but speaking what God gave me. So as a pastor, I got to make sure that I'm always staying out of the way for that. So
amen. So they let the bench warmers have a turn every.
They let the bench warmers every once in a while. They pull the first string up, and we get to swing at the ball. Like good job. No. Yeah. Well, hey, again, this United Opposition, we have two people who are diametrically opposed on a lot of things, but yet we still come together and have a podcast and talk about it. Today, we're going to be talking about Trump and Biden, and maybe going over the results of that debate from a week and a half ago, and stuff like that. But before we get started, just want to say thank you to Covenant Coffee. Hope in a cup, as it says right there. Covenant Coffee is a sponsor of 511 Media Group, and Covenant Coffee, when you support them, you're supporting emancipated foster youth, kids who've aged out. They've hit 18 and they're not really in the homes or anything like that, but they don't. Where are they going to go? Covenant Coffee helps support them, helps support places for them to live, gives them jobs, and gives them mentoring. And so when you're buying Covenant Coffee, you're buying hope in a cup for these young kids. So I'm going to do my little coffee ASMR. Covenant Coffee. Here we go. There we go. Thank you very much, Covenant Coffee. So, all right. So Trump and Biden, you and I kind of were on, were you texting me or were we on Facebook? I can't remember what it was. And like you said something and I'm like, you know what? Then let's talk about it. That'd be a good conversation. So I'm going to give my 1 minute spiel. You give a 1 minute spiel and then we'll go into it. How's that sound?
Fantastic.
All right, cool. So I wrote mine down, so I'm just going to read it. So for the most part, neither of these candidates are Marshall or my first choice. So we're just going to get that out of the way. It's certainly not my first choice. I don't think Biden's your first choice. But despite all of his personality faults, all of his legal faults, Trump is at least capable of performing the job. And I think a vote for Biden makes no rational sense at this point to actively choose to try to put somebody back in that position who just does not have the actual mental capability to do it. Of all the faults that Trump has, and there's many, most of it is just people don't like him, and because he's a jerk. But Biden, it's like, how can this person make executive decisions? That's where I'm coming from. Marshall?
Yeah, not a fan of the Biden regime at all, but I do think that we have a pretty stark situation before us. I think the ship is going down and we have to save the ship. And I think that Trump would simply open another hole, whereas at least with Biden, maybe we save the ship. Now, that doesn't mean we're out of the icebergs, but I certainly have other thoughts, but I really don't see a path forward for the Democrats and this nation. Really, I think we have a stark choice.
So I have to ask you this. So you're saying that a vote for Biden is going to save the ship. What exactly are you actually thinking you're going to get? Are you actually trying to vote to have Biden in there, or are you assuming that he's going to be set aside and somebody's going to come in and at least it'll be a person who's on the left? Are you actually voting for Biden, or are you just voting for the left?
Yeah, well, we're not going to get the left. I think that's been long established in American politics. But I'm hoping that we elect Biden and get nothing versus Trump, who I think would actually go to work on the bottom of the ship, cutting a hole, if you will.
Because he was here. That's exactly what he did. He totally wrecked the economy. He totally messed everything. Oh, wait, no, that's not what happened when Trump was here. No, everything, gas prices were lower, economy was better, everybody was doing better. It doesn't seem like he was cutting holes in the bottom of the ship then.
Yeah, he was. He removed us from the Paris Climate Accords. He let Iran
Oh,
off the hook. The geopolitical situation, significantly diminished under his leadership. Not to mention the domestic situation in this country. We had kids in cages, of course, and of course we still do, by the way. So I'm
yeah.
not a fan of the Biden
I wasn't talking about
administration,
him.
but the
That's
Biden
a red herring.
administration
That's a red herring. You can't get away with
has
that
worked.
one.
Okay, the Biden administration has worked very hard to at least kind of maintain the ship, and I don't think they've done a horrible job of it. But after his performance 2 weeks ago on the debate stage, or 11 days ago, whatever it was, 2 weeks basically,
Ish, yeah.
I think that sets a very dangerous precedent. It's basically like an invitation for the sharks to circle, if you will. So
Do you mean domestically or do you mean foreignly?
well, both, but especially on the international stage, because if you have a president who's incapable of performing the job, they don't have the mental acuity to do the job right,
Mhm.
and you put them into a state of crisis where they have to make a snap decision or a quick decision. I don't trust that Joe Biden is the person to do that.
Why will you vote for him?
Because
No rational.
aside from those emergency situations where hopefully he at least has a vice president or a staff or aides around him who can at least point him in the right direction,
Is that even legal?
I do think that Trump would actively undermine the institutions that make America America. Of course, America's on its way out. We're doomed already, but I do think that Trump would simply hasten the demise. And I
But that
think
didn't happen the 4 years he was the president before.
no, I disagree with you entirely. Again, like I mentioned before, the withdrawal from the Paris Climate Accords, letting Iran off the hook, putting out the welcome mat to people like Putin and others, and basically domestically packing the courts with, ultra right-wing judges, packing the Supreme Court with his choices, which of course that's what he's going to do as president. It's his prerogative. But following what they did to Obama and stuff like that and all these other things,
That's
we
all I'm
have
that's what I'm really voting for.
right, and we have a very dangerous situation in this country. When you take a look at the Chevron decision, which effectively undermines the executive's branch to execute, to do what the executive branch is supposed to do, we're in a very dangerous state in this nation.
I think there was way too much power given to unelected officials. That's what that's correcting.
Right. Well, do you think there's too much power given to police?
I think there was way too much regulatory power given to non-elected officials.
Yeah. Do you think there's too much power given to, let's say, police or the fire department or anything? Because it's all the same. At the end of the day, the Chevron ruling just says that these people who are experts in the field have the right and the ability to
experts in the field. These are
reasonably interpret the law to enforce it.
These aren't experts in the field. These are people who are handpicked by whatever political party is in power.
You're telling me that the people who run the IRS are not experts on, let's say, tax policy?
No,
they're not.
The leaders are not
just political hacks.
Yes, the people who are handpicked to be in charge. Yes, they are political appointments. You know that. You know they are political appointments, and those things are handed out like candy as paybacks for favors. Now, the people who are pushing the buttons and all that kind of stuff, yes, those are experts. Those are people who are doing stuff. The rank and file are experts. The people in charge are not.
Okay, so I understand what you're saying at the cabinet level. You're correct, but beneath them, the department, the people who run the actual day-to-day operations of things like OSHA, the IRS, the EPA, and others. Those are people who have been in those offices as a career. They came up, they worked their way up through the ranks. So they are the ones who are basically steering and guiding and saying, look,
they're not. Their hands are tied by their bosses. The bosses make executive decisions.
Well, and you're right. There's some degree of that, but at the end of the day, do you want them to have the power to make reasonable decisions to enforce the law, or do you want every single dispute or problem to be thrown into a courtroom for interpretation by a judge, who, by the way, is not going to be an expert on tax collection or the EPA or OSHA guidelines or any of that other stuff? Who do you prefer should make the decision?
As close to the people as possible.
Okay, well, a judge isn't necessarily close to the people. I'll tell you that either.
Right.
The bottom line is we're going to have courts that are absolutely clogged in the next year or two with cases from people all over who are going to challenge whether or not the interpretation of the laws passed by Congress is whether or not these laws are being reasonably executed by these various departments. The end result of that is a court system that's going to be completely gummed up, and agencies of the executive branch that cannot execute their duty.
I would rather
what causes a government to collapse?
See, I would rather have, because you're dealing with a person who's had to go through the red tape of the up in the twice now, once with the FAA, once with the FCC, and once with the FAA, having no representation to the people who are in charge, no way to go back. I don't know how many events and churches and everything across the United States were affected. Was 10 or 12 years ago when the FCC just decided to say, you know what, this frequency, we're going to sell it to the highest bidder, which ended up being like either Verizon or AT&T or something like that. And there was no recourse. There was no place for the people to go. There was no lawyer. There was no the people to go. It was just simply this regulatory body just said, this is what we're going to do. And there was no recourse for the people. I would rather at least have some kind of recourse, have somebody that's accountable to voters, so that we can petition, we can bring. It was just simply a decision. And the same thing with the FAA now with drones. That's part of my job, and the regulatory body, being able to just decide whether or not they're going to do what they're going to do, and all the regulations that went along with that. There was no recourse. There's nothing you can do. There's no one you can petition to say, hey, what are you doing? What about the people who are affected by this? It's a regulatory body. There is no petition. They just make the call.
Right. So I'm not going to argue with you whether or not the system works. I think the system does work, but it doesn't work as efficiently or as quickly as we would prefer it to work. And we probably disagree with some of the things that the system does. And that's going to be normal. It is a big bureaucratic, or the correct word is technically Byzantine. It's a Byzantine system. And I absolutely get that. But we are choosing between a system that is in a serious state of decay and is seriously inefficient, but still somehow manages to chug along, and a system that is actively going to break down under a different administration.
Right,
and but if the system breaks down, you don't have a government anymore. We don't have a United States anymore.
You're making opposing arguments. You are saying that we're going to have this problem because we don't have the Chevron decision has taken power away. The executive branch cannot do their job because of this. And at the same time, you're trying to make the argument but we can't have Donald Trump come in because he's going to take over and abuse the executive. You're making the argument that the executive is losing power and that's bad. And then you're also making the argument that we can't have Trump in there because he's going to have too much power. Which one is it? Is it that there's going to be
you misunderstand. He's actually going to further degrade the power to zero. So we can either move along at 20 miles an hour, or we can move along at zero, or even go backwards. That's the choice.
Trump is going to come.
We don't have a good choice here. We have just two bad choices.
I agree, but you're making the argument that Trump is going to come in and try to reduce the power of the executive branch.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and he's done so historically. Look at how many vacancies there were. And look at how many vacancies there were in government under his administration that never got filled. What's that?
What's your fear of him?
I'm not hearing you. I apologize.
Then what's your fear of him? If he's going to reduce the power of the executive, why is everybody afraid of him coming in and taking control?
Well, because control is always going to be there. Control is ubiquitous. The question is, who's going to wield that control? And if you don't have a strong democratic central government, if you don't have a republic, as the founding fathers intended, if you will, you have a power vacuum. What's going to fill that vacuum? I'm not actually worried about Trump. People think, well, Trump will become a dictator. I'm not so worried about Trump. Okay. Trump may be the Caesar. But I'm worried about who comes after that. We're going to get Tiberius, Caligula, Nero. Who comes after Trump? That's what we got to think about, because I don't think we're going to get an Augustus. I don't see an Augustus anywhere in this country. We're not going to get an Augustus. So we're going to go straight from Caesar to, Tiberius, who was just a murdering fool, to Caligula or Nero, who are both insane,
Mhm.
and that's what I'm worried about happening to this country. So at this point, I would rather we not snap straight into the abyss, and instead we try to slow the decline and try to figure out a way to have a soft landing rather than just go right off the cliff. And to me, that's kind of the
Well,
choice that we have.
I don't know. I want to use the word like. It's not what I'm trying to say. I think a lot of times it's healthier to rip the Band-Aid off than it is to slowly peel it back. Sometimes it's healthier to, just go in and take care of it, let it happen, and then recover from it than it is to slow it down. And if this is really, if you think this is really leading to that, then isn't it actually healthier just to, hey, let's just get there and then let's deal with it? Why?
I would agree with you if we could do it democratically, but I don't know that it can or will be done democratically.
Or are you just saying, just wait until I'm out and then you guys deal with it? Are you just trying to punt it down the road to somebody else?
Well, inevitably, right? All empires, all civilizations, that happens, right? But you take a look at, again, our analog here, which is the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire went into decline after 180 AD with the death of Marcus Aurelius, and it ultimately collapsed in the West, at least in the year 476 AD. And so it had almost a 300-year long period of decline. And I think we started that. To me, I think it kind of started with 9/11. And we haven't really reversed the decline. Now, what you can do is you can slow it, just as the Roman Empire had, Diocletian and
I get it.
Constantine and Theodosius.
I get it, but what I'm asking you is, can you provide a reason why that's better to slow it? Why is that better to slow it?
Because the collapse of our federal government is probably going to create a lot of bloodshed, chaos, and hardship for countless people. If we can manage this in a democratic fashion where we don't get, a civil war, that would be preferable.
But I'm just saying, you're saying we're going to get there anyway. It's just going to take longer to get there. Why is that?
I don't think a full-blown, internal civil war is necessarily inevitable. I do think that at some point we're going to have to hit a reset button on our government.
Mm-hmm.
The way in which we govern ourselves and manage our institutions, that's going to have to change because it ain't working for nobody anymore. And when that happens, well, it's all over.
So you think that a vote for Biden,
is a vote for slow decline as opposed to rapid decline. Slow decline, I think we can kind of adjust and acclimate as we go. Rapid decline.
Immediately right now, having a president that's incapable of doing the job. I mean, to use my own argument, maybe that is the better thing to do, is to go ahead and have Biden be president and let everything fall apart right now. If we want to go ahead and let it fall apart faster, I just don't see I don't see how having Biden president now actually leads to a slower decay when it's a person who is not capable of doing the job. Any emergency right now, I mean, is there somebody else making the decisions right now, or is Biden making the decisions?
Yeah, and we don't know.
If he's making,
don't know. That's the problem.
Any emergency could be the end, could be anything, or is somebody else already illegally running the country?
Right. Well, we don't know who's calling the shots. Maybe he is calling the shots. Maybe it's somebody else. But so far, so good compared to when Trump was calling the shots. And you actually had a letter come out of the White House saying, well, there are adults in the room with this guy. Really? And that's his own staff.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I would still like to know who the hell sent that letter. That person needs to,
Right. But at the same time, the current president has to be handheld and walked off of a stage. Talk about adults having to be in the room for him. He can't sit down. He can't walk. He can't have a conversation.
Right.
Like it does not make any sense.
I get it. But the only barometer we have is the last 4 years or 3.5 years. And they haven't been absolutely horrible. I mean, I think we could have done better in so many ways, but they are at least acceptable. And I'm kind of hoping
it's not acceptable. Where we're at with inflation is not acceptable. Where we're at with how much things cost and the price of gas is not acceptable. It's not where it was 6 years ago. It's
That's
not where
right.
it was.
That's right. Oh, I agree with you there. You know,
Yeah. So
but
no,
but if you think
you're
that the
assessing that it's
Republicans are
not
going to
that
do,
bad.
if you think the Republicans, especially under Trump, are going to do anything but put the whole country up for
Well,
sale,
Well, if we just
then,
look,
you know,
if we look at where we were when Trump was president, then yeah, the evidence shows that the economy will get better.
well,
economy will get
again, you have the COVID inflation, which is still going strong.
Mhm.
And you have the Federal Reserve, which claims to be curbing inflation by having increased interest rates, which is what it's supposed to do anyway. But at the end of the day, neither of these candidates is going to do anything really to give the American consumers relief. We live in a capitalist society, you know, and so the name of the game is corporate profits. It's feeding Wall Street. That's not going to change no matter what happens. Even if the government collapses, Wall Street's going to continue to feed.
I just think it's going to be more in the pockets of the average American under Republican leadership. I think there's going to be more for us. I think that we've seen that. We've seen that already.
No, I think, yeah. Well, you know, all I can say is just from my understanding and belief and knowledge of economics and government and so on, it's a choice between bad and worse. And so I'm forced to choose the bad. That's something I'm very upset about. And we're not pursuing any of the policies that are necessary to reverse the decline. If you need to look at an example, you got to go all the way back to FDR. You know, he's the one who actually figured it out and said, this is what we're going to do and reverse the decline. And of course, we had a great big stimulus project called World War II that helped.
Yeah.
You know, which is insane.
That was the recovery, not his plan. That was the recovery.
No, his plan did stave off revolution and other problems in this country. So no, I think that his plan, the New Deal, worked very, very well. Life improved for a lot of people.
It did exactly what the Democrat Party always does, and what you want to do. It just delayed it, and it delayed it long enough until a war came in and boosted the economy. That's all it did. It just pushed it. It didn't solve it. It just delayed it, because that's what Democrats like to do. Delay it to the next generation. Delay it to the next generation.
I think the average American, is in particular the average American worker, saw an improvement in their quality of life under FDR. Absolutely. You know, look at the minimum wage. No, before the war. You know, remember the crash was 1929, 1932, and so on, the Depression. But we were coming out of the Depression by World War II. World War II accelerated us out of the Depression at the cost of a great national debt, mind you.
It depends on what you call World War II. When did World War II start for America?
Well, on December 7th, 1941.
No. When did America start ramping up production for war?
Well, probably as early as 1939. Yeah, we began, increasing our production.
Earlier than that, we were supplying stuff. We were supplying stuff to the British. We were sending ships across. We were already starting.
Yeah, to build. That was the Lend-Lease. That was Lend-Lease, and I believe that was 1940. Was Lend-Lease? Yeah,
but we had to build this stuff before we could send it.
Oh no! Well, that was a lot of surplus stuff, including stuff from World War I. The ships that we sent, the destroyers that we sent to England, were World War I era destroyers. They were already 20 years old.
I'll give you that one. I want to understand a picture. I'm trying. I don't get this. So I'm just going to ask you as this, seeing the clear pattern that Biden is just not actually capable of making executive decisions. I still don't understand how you can place a vote. What are you picturing somebody else is making the call for him? Are you just gambling that, you know what, I'm just going to take the gamble that we're not going to have an incident where his incapacity to be able to make an executive decision will hurt us? Are you just blindly like, I'm just going to hope. I hope that there's not I don't understand, seeing what you see about this person, how you can say, I'm going to vote for this person to be in power with executive power for the next 4 years. I don't understand how you're doing that. I don't know. What is your end game? What is your hope? What do you see that says it's okay, it makes sense to give this person 4 more years? Please explain that.
Right. So I don't know if he's actually making decisions or not. He might be. What we saw 2 weeks ago might have literally been a bad night. Now, I'm pretty skeptical about that, but okay. The other thing is, like I said, the only evidence, the only barometer we have is to look at the record of the past few years. And I feel that he's been generally acceptable. Yes, inflation's bad, but what can the president do about inflation per se, other than implement, other than make cuts? And, the Federal Reserve is really the institution that manages the business cycles. And they've done what they can do, which is raise interest rates. And it is having some effect. I really think, however, the problem is corporate greed. And we're not going to get a solution out of either Trump or Biden to address the heart of that issue.
You're not answering the question. You're not answering my question.
I'm saying he's the least of the two worst options. If we go over to Trump, we're looking at a person who's going to actively undermine, who literally disrespects the institutions of this nation.
You're not answering my question.
All right, what's your question again?
My question literally is, what are you just blindly hoping that there is not? It's got to be one of two things. You're either blindly hoping that there's not going to be an emergency where the person with the executive power has the incapacity to make decisions, or you're gambling on the hope that he's already not making decisions on somebody. Which one is it? What you're placing your vote for a person who is incapable of doing this job for the next 4 years, and yet you're still willing to put this person in office. What is that vote on? What do you think is going to happen? Do you think we're not going to have an emergency situation, or do you think somebody's already just making the decisions for him and you're okay with that? Which of those? Because that's really the only two options that you're voting for.
The answer is yes, both of those. And I actually don't have any reason to believe that Trump won't actively worsen or undermine the situation and actually make it worse. So you're right. It's kind of like the only winning move here is to not play, as opposed to vote for the guy who's actually going to, get a saw and start cutting out the bottom of the boat.
Again, that's hyperbole. That's hyperbole.
Well, you don't. We'll see, won't we?
That's hyperbole.
See. Yeah, we'll see.
Everything that everybody's like, oh my gosh, Trump is going to do this. He was president for 4 years, and those things didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. Well, and again, go ahead and elect him. That's fine, mm-hmm. But he's not the one you have to worry about.
I'll give you that. I think that is a valid argument. I think that's a good warning, a good shot across the bow. So outside of anything else, we got 2 minutes left. Outside of anything else, ballots are clear. Nobody is on the ballot. Who do you put on the ballot? Who runs against who? Which two people do you put on the ballot? That gives both sides a good shot.
I would pick a moderate for both sides. So unfortunately, that would probably be an establishment Democrat, but a moderate Republican. You know who I would like? Mitt Romney. I could support someone like Mitt Romney. I don't even know what he's doing these days.
Yeah,
but I could support that dude.
How about of the people who are on the short list, if to replace Biden? Who are you going for?
I would like to say Gavin Newsom, but we live in California, don't we?
Yeah.
So I don't know enough about Megan Whitmer of Colorado. Pete Buttigieg is as establishment as they come, and that kind of scares me. So there's nobody who I'm really thrilled about. I love, of course, Bernie Sanders, but he's obviously way too old, and he would never get an agenda through, even on a good day, because the nation's just not ready for that. Certainly not our institutions. So at the end of the day, I would have to say, Scott
Garcia sounds good. Scott Garcia for president. Answering the question for you, Marshall. Would you be my running mate and be vice president?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I could stand to be vice president for about a week.
The opponents, right? Wasn't that the original way it was in the Constitution? The whoever got the most votes was president. Whoever got the second most votes was vice president.
That's right. Let's
go back to that. Let's have the two candidates have to work together afterwards. Maybe that's not such a bad way to do it.
Just they can learn bad about your slip and fall, man.
I know. Right down those stairs. Oh wait, Our president's already doing that. On that note. Thank you for watching United Opposition. with Scott and Marshall every week, Tuesdays at 4:00, or two people on opposite sides of the topics get to come together, have a friendly debate, have a friendly talk. And we hope that everyone can learn from this on how to deal with the people who are in opposition with. Still be united. All right. See you guys till next time. God bless.
Thank you. Bye-bye.